Hi, welcome to the Capital Coffee Connection podcast. I'm Liz Hirsh Naftali, and this podcast is about talking with our elected leaders about their heart and their humanity. We're not going to really get into politics and policy, although sometimes it blends, but we're looking at this purely as like who our elected leaders are as people. And today I have Congresswoman Teresa Leger Fernandez.
Good morning. It is wonderful to be here in this exciting time for Democrats and I think our nation.
For our nation. And you're from Mexico's 3rd District.
New Mexico's 3rd District, which is, I call it beautiful and beautifully diverse. Santa Fe is where I live, but I'm from rural New Mexico. My district is one of the largest districts in Congress, mostly rural, amazingly beautiful. 16 different indigenous pueblos, the Navajo Nation, the Hickory Apache Nation, about 40-some% Latino, ranchers, farmers, gorgeous.
And so when you travel around, I'm just curious, skipping around, but when you travel around, you must just look outside and think, I am like in a heavenly place.
I love I'm a 17th generation New Mexican. So I have been there for a while, and my ancestors have been there for a while. That's on the European side. And I just love it. Like every time I have left New Mexico, and I've done that for school and for work and, under the Clinton administration, I just get homesick. And it's like, it's a yo-yo. It's so beautiful. It draws me home. So that's why Congress is a perfect job. I go back and forth twice a week.
Exactly. So talk about like the Native population and that you've been there for 17 generations. So you're really part of the beginning of New Mexico. I mean,
yeah, we go back. We have marvelous stories because, New Mexico was part of Mexico. It was part of Spain. It was indigenous for 23 million years is how far back we've identified people living in New Mexico. Some of the oldest footprints, oldest evidence of humans in the Americas are found in New Mexico. And it is incredibly rich in its cultural heritage. We speak 8 different indigenous languages. Spanish is what I grew up speaking with my grandmother, and it's an old Spanish that comes, from centuries ago. And so we're very proud of who we are, but this is what happens. Is when you are proud of who you are, you also can then be curious about other people. So what I love is that even though we're a place of incredible poverty, in some of our areas, we also are a place of curiosity and opportunity. Like we don't have this sense of division and hatred of the other. We have a curiosity about the other. And I think that that's the moment we are in as a country of being able to go beyond this division and realize that we are part of a common idea that we want to be curious about each other, and we want to join together to work on something bigger and better than ourselves in the future.
I love that. And I think the only thing I add to that is like we have to celebrate our differences, because you and I don't come from the same place. We're very different, but we can sit and have this beautiful conversation. And like you said, if you are secure, you can reach out. And I believe with everything in this podcast and what I've been dealing with that, to have coffee with you for 20, 25 minutes and just to reach out. And I will say that I've also spoken with people who are from the other side of the aisle, had these amazing conversations with people that maybe a few years ago I would have thought were impossible. But I've come away thinking, we have so much more that brings us together than what does separate us. And while going back to we just need to celebrate what brings us together because we are Americans. At the end of the day, we're all Americans.
So, what I like to tell a story about the way New Mexico gets water to irrigate our fields. If you'll indulge me.
Yeah, I love it.
Because I love this story. I think it is about who we are. So, you think of New Mexico and you think arid and dry. And I think rich and vibrant. But that's because for centuries, we have figured out that the way we get that snow melt that, melts into those rivers and we get into our field is through what we call an acequia. It's a ditch. So this is a beautiful story about a ditch.
Yes, okay.
Because this ditch is worked together. We all come together and work this ditch, this acequia together, and we manage it. And then we take that water that we have all made sure flows into our little acequias together, and we irrigate our individual fields. And this is what America is. Like everybody who works that ditch has a little part of that water. And every American has a little piece of America. And when we work together, we can then irrigate our own fields, our own future. And that's once again what I am excited about in this moment is that Americans, rural people, they always know that they are part of something that is bigger than themselves. If you go into rural communities, they know they rely on their neighbors. They depend on them. Regardless of whether they're Democrat or Republican, right? They know that if their car goes off in a ditch, somebody's going to come and pull them out. They're not going to ask them, what are your beliefs? Like, where's your hitch? I'm going to.
Yes.
But it's that concept that I think that with this moment we're in, where we have the opposite of hatred and division, and you need to think of yourself as somebody different, and they are wrong, and they are stupid, and they are, whatever you want to claim, they're immigrants, and the hatred that's put on other people versus how can I help you out? Because together we are something bigger. And that is what New Mexico, that's like my little acequia. I used to be an acequia commissioner. I still have water rights. We have farmland and ranch land. And I just love that story about that's a little bit of America, even though it's really very old and Nuevo Mexicano.
I think it's a little bit of America, but it's a lot of America.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Could you share a little bit about growing up and what it was like to grow up in New Mexico? And I assume the influence of your parents, and what they did, but also your grandparents and your community.
Right. So I grew up in a very small town. My parents and my grandparents were from surrounding villages, and it was rich. My parents were actually the kind of people who constantly give back to the community. They ended up becoming educators. My mother had 7 kids, and I remember her working on getting her degree and falling asleep on the typewriter.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the imprint of the letters? But she got a degree, and she ended up, along with my father, being pioneers in bilingual education. They realized that the language that was spoken in the kitchen needed to be taught in the classroom. Mm-hmm. And so I grew up with the sense of it was the Chicano Renaissance, right? About reaffirming our pride and our música, poesía, and teatro. We reaffirmed that pride. And I think it's why we are so rich in identity now, even if we are still struggling with issues of poverty and opportunity. But they modeled for me how to constantly be in contact, be part of your community, even as you try to serve it in a way beyond, which is what I ended up doing, right? Running for Congress.
Well, running for Congress. I mean, I think a lot of the leaders that I've spoken with have parents that didn't have a lot, but gave back a lot, which I think is a very common thing, whether it's through teaching or through social work or through local legislation. So there's a pattern of kids who grow up and see their parents participating and then say, oh, I also can, and I also want to. And now you just do it, and many do it as elected leaders, which is another way to give back. And truthfully, like a really hard way, because to get elected and do all that work, no matter where you are in the United States, it takes a lot.
But I always joke about that. For my job interview, I have to get interviewed by 721,000 people every 2 years and say, will you rehire me?
And they're looking. They're looking. So I get it. And 7 siblings. Where do you fall in line in 7 siblings?
I'm the first daughter. I have 5 older brothers and a baby sister. Well, I had. Unfortunately, I lost my 2 oldest brothers to addiction and suicide and untreated and undiagnosed mental illness, and then my baby sister to cancer. So, we've gone through a lot of trauma and sadness in my family, but those things, they carry with you. I work a lot on issues around mental health, around addiction.
Thank you.
And those are issues that plague New Mexico. Those are issues that plague America.
I think they plague every family. I mean, I know from my friends and my family, we've had a lot of loss. And it's both from mental illness, drug addiction, and it's just something that I think we all relate to. And unfortunately, it does not care where you are, what your zip code is, or who you voted for.
And what we haven't done in this country, but we are starting. We are starting. That's, once again, I love this moment we are in because we are finally starting to say, let's treat mental illness. Let's treat drug addiction, not as something criminal or something to be hidden, but as a healthcare issue.
Exactly.
And when we treat it as a healthcare issue, we can create those possibilities for others. I love, one of the guys who was in AA with my brother, and now he's this amazing person who handles all the cultural affairs for the city of Albuquerque. And he always comes up to me and says, your mom was the mom to all of us. And even though you lost your brother, she helped us.
Beautiful.
She helped me get to where I was. And so those are inspirations for legislation that I carry.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Talk a little bit about growing up in school. Like, did you have special teachers? I always like to ask, who are your influential teachers and what did they influence? And people have really beautiful stories about their teachers.
Well, you know what? I was one of the first Head Start babies in New Mexico. And so I really loved my teacher, Mrs. Vasquez, and she was just marvelous, right? And I always talk about that's where I fell in love with learning was as this little girl in school. I loved the watermelon and the naps.
Yes.
But it was that point of being able to go in and play with kids, even though we were from a big family, I have, maybe 100 cousins, but it was that structured environment where you walked to school, your grandmother took you to school, you had your braids all nice and tight because your mother did, those nice long Latina braids. Mm-hmm. It is that moment, I think, that I just began to love being able to walk to school. I loved that. And now we know that what did Head Start give me? It gave me snacks. I love to eat. All I remember was eating, right? And the joy, but I loved that watermelon. We know that when you feed our children, they learn better.
Yes.
But we also know that when we give early childhood education quality, we are investing in our future.
Exactly.
And I love the fact that we're doing that. We're doing that in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. As, the Trump administration, Project 2025, they want to get rid of the Department of Education. They want to get rid of Head Start. I had a bill before me where they wanted to do that in the Wolves Committee. I sit in the Wolves Committee. So all the bills, they go to the House floor. I'm one of 4 Democrats. There's 9 Republicans on the other side. And our job, we're never going to win the vote, but we always win the argument. And we point out, what are you doing to the Department of Education? What are you doing to Head Start? Do you know that you are depriving America of its future? And that's like kind of what happened to me. I fell in love with the idea of going to school and learning. And it was so much fun. Like, why would we deprive small children of that now? Why would we go backwards?
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes back to like where you say like it's an investment. Now look at where you are and what you're able to do for so many people. So
yeah. We have Senator Warnock who gave an amazing speech last night. He's one of the Head Start babies. I started a Head Start to Congress caucus.
Yeah. And I'll just add, I mean, this is, that Maxine Waters was one of the first people to work on Head Start early on in her career. Yes. So there's a lot of good stories and a lot of success, and our country needs to be able to invest in our people. So I think that's and in our children. I mean, exactly. I think at the end of the day, we do this for our children, for our grandchildren, for our grandchildren,
for our children.
Yes. Do you have how many children do you have?
I have three kids.
And do you have time to spend with them? I mean, how do you balance between, we'll go to that one. How do you balance between flying from New Mexico to DC and being in both places?
Well, that's always hard. I always now have come to realize that the hardest part of the job are the flights, because they don't get you where you're supposed to do. You end up staying in Denver overnight. It's that is the frustrating part. But the ability, I fly out in the morning, really early plane, small little plane going out of Santa Fe, and look down and I imagine, and I see in my eye all the kitchens, right, where people are getting their breakfast ready. Mm-hmm. And some of those kitchens are incredibly humble. They're making whatever the traditional foods are. A lot of people still use wood burning stoves, wood burning heat. Mm-hmm. And I carry that idea of what's happening because I'm from those kitchens.
Yes.
I've sat in them. And I carry that with me to DC, which is a completely different environment. And
that's so important because that informs the work you're able to do for those people and for this country.
Right. And so, that's the hard part of it. The easy part of it is really taking their voices to DC. That's why I always say I just echo people's voices, right? It's like I hear sometimes it's pain and sometimes it's excitement about opportunity. And that's what I take to DC.
Yeah.
Right. And I take that, and we've been incredibly successful at getting stuff back for New Mexico. We suffered one of the worst fires in history in New Mexico. It was started by the United States Forest Service. And so I said, well, this isn't right. And normally when the United States government ruins people's lives, you can't sue them, right? There's no liability. There's no justice. Not this time, because we had a Democrat president, a Democrat Senate, a Democrat House. Guess what? $3.95 billion to help compensate this rural community, Spanish-speaking, poor, beautiful, proud, to compensate them for their losses, because the Forest Service started that fire. And
what year was that?
We're going on 2 years. We're going on our third year of recovering from that fire.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that, like, I would fly over and I could see the fire. I'd fly home and you could see that fire just destroying this beautiful, beautiful landscape that was, we scattered the ashes of my sister in that forest because it was the most beautiful thing she remembered. And she said, I want to be scattered along that riverbank. And it's all turned to ashes. And that was my sister who had gone by, but people whose ranches and livelihood depended on those forests and those ranches and those small businesses and these teeny little villages. And that's one of the things you can do, is take those voices and then bring justice home.
In that vein, I ask this other question, which is, what is the best advice you've received? The worst advice you've received? And a little bit about that, like, what is the advice you give others?
The great thing about Congress is I am surrounded by brilliant, compassionate colleagues.
Yeah.
People always try to say, the people, it's like, oh my goodness, my colleagues are incredibly generous. And so one of the pieces of advice that I've taken to heart is getting to know them, right? And going to dinner. And finding some time, because we don't have a lot of time. You should see
You're rushing in and out of vote and everything.
Like
and
meetings in the hallways. I'll go from a meeting in the hallway to the meeting in the, 2 different meetings in the little lobby. People being taken over to the Capitol to meet with me. But then finding a little bit of time to have that sit down and say, well, you can eat with a knife and fork, because we never have time to eat with knives and forks when we're in Congress. It's just too busy. You are trying to, get finger food into it. Right. And that is, I think, a wonderful thing to do, because it's building those relationships. And I also have bipartisan dinners. There's a wonderful colleague of mine who we came in as freshmen. We started talking and he said, I want to be able to have will you bring some Democrats over to my house and we'll have dinners together? It's like, okay. And it's been lovely.
That's wonderful.
You get to meet people offline.
Yeah. And what advice do you give to young people? Because I'm sure you have a lot of young people that come to you and they want to know how you became a congressperson. What do you do? How do you do?
One of the things I think is really important, especially for young people, because people are always telling them, find your passion, right? It's like, I didn't know what my passions would be. I sort of said yes to different opportunities in life. Some people know exactly what they want to be, but many others don't. And I think that the key thing is do whatever you're doing with passion.
Yeah.
Right. And with joy. And when you find that moment of joy of what you're doing, you hit it. And it might not be what you will end up doing for the rest of your life, but say yes to opportunities and seek them out. And then the other thing is, don't let go the good friendships and mentorships that you've created along the way.
Yeah.
You asked me earlier about my children. I didn't run for Congress until my children were older, because I'm kind of like, I'm divorced and I've carried the bulk of raising my children, making sure that financially we're able to do that, right? So, and I'm not technically a single mom, but I've really carried that role in so many ways. And so I couldn't run because I didn't have that support at home. I had 3 kids. But once I decided to run, even though it was a little later than some, those friendships from college, from law school,
everyone showed up for you.
They all showed up. It was like, the sense of love, and gratitude. It's just great. And, I used in my campaign love. that we don't need to always, it's not always fight. Sometimes it's love. My slogan in my campaign was protect what we love. And that boomerangs back to you. That when you do stuff from that place of love, from that place of joy, it's going to boomerang back to you and it just builds.
That's really lovely. Okay, so you just answered pretty much my last question, but there's a part in between, because my last question is about joy. But there is a part in between which I'd love to just run through, which is get to know Teresa a little bit through some quick questions, okay? What is your favorite sound?
Water. Water coming down a stream or I come from New Mexico, so we value water. Agua es vida, water is life. So anytime you hear rushing water, I'm like, ooh, that's happy.
Yeah. Favorite scent or smell?
I have an incredibly good sense of smell, and I love it when all the flowers are blooming. I love it when I'm taking a hike in the forest and you can smell not just the pine tree, but you can smell all of the decomposition that's happening in the soil. I love that smell.
Beautiful. Favorite color?
Oh, you know what? It's interesting. It used to always be the reds, but as you can see now, I'm moving towards the blues. Maybe I'm becoming more partisan than I thought.
Yes. No, but your earrings are blue and they're beautiful.
Yes.
Where are those from? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my earrings are Pat Pruitt, who's from the Pueblo of Laguna, and he used to be a tribal council member at the Pueblo. I represented the Pueblo for about 30 years, but he's an award-winning artist. And so go look him online.
They're beautiful. Who is your biggest cheerleader?
Oh, it's always your children.
Yeah.
It's always one of my kids is just, even when I come home with some bad news about a piece of press, and he goes, oh, I had everybody look at that and they all agree with me, blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. They're on your side.
It's on my side. And he goes and he does these polls, and he doesn't tell people who he is. And then he comes back and lets me know that, okay, Mommy.
I love that story. Yeah. Your kids got your back. Right?
Yeah, they did.
What is your favorite meal? If you were on a deserted island, they said you get to pick one meal that's going to show up.
It's got to be chili. The thing is, if I'm on a deserted island and I got to answer this question, in New Mexico, we have an official question. Really one of the only states that has an official question. It's red or green. And so we love red chili, we love green chili, and you can get Christmas for those people who don't really want to give up on either or. So I'm getting a Christmas enchilada on my deserted island.
I love that. I never heard that. That's brilliant. Okay. Then afterwards you have dessert. What's your favorite ice cream? What's your flavor?
Vanilla.
So just plain old beautiful vanilla.
Because then you can put all kinds of stuff with it, and really good vanilla that's nice and thick that you can taste the vanilla bean. I love to cook. Cook it.
Oh my God, you're getting me. I mean, it makes me a little bit hungry, just having this conversation. One more question, which is, if you could travel somewhere that you haven't been, where would you go?
I actually want to go to New Zealand. And right now we have Tom Udall, who was responsible for me being here because he decided to retire. So then Ben Ray Lujan decided to run for Congress, and this came up, and so I'm here. But he's now the ambassador there. But didn't you love Lord of the Rings? Didn't everybody love those landscapes?
It's stunning.
Both the story and then it's stunning. So I want to get to New Zealand.
And it's all like family, within the state of New Mexico and everything.
We are so connected.
Yes. You already sort of answered it, but the last question is about joy. And I really asked each leader, what brings you joy? And you've talked about that. And thank you. But I'm going to ask this last piece, which is, if you are joyful and you share that joy with others, first, how do you do it? And what do you think that means to them? Because I feel like we've talked about that love and reaching out to people, but I'd love to get it in your own words.
I don't know, because people are always coming up and say, you have so much energy. It's like, I'm just being who I am. I'm my mother's daughter, mother's daughter. And she went around and, I lost her way too early. And she always found such joy in everything, just in everything. We were always like, oh my God, there goes Mom again. She's being too joyful.
But now
I
cherish those moments.
So thankful.
Yeah.
But I think it is that I find joy in my gente, in my people.
Mm-hmm.
But can I tell? I don't know if we have enough time. I once I was trying to protect a sacred lake of the Zuni Salt Lake from a coal mine, which would have destroyed it. I put a war chief on the stand as my expert. And I asked the war chief, what's your job? And his answer was, I pray. And I said, oh, you pray for your community. He goes, that won't be a true prayer. You must pray in ever expanding circles to include everybody. including the criaturas de Dios, including the creatures of God, which includes the plants and the water, right? And so when I say I find joy from my gente, from my community, you have to think of joy, including everybody that war chief told us a true prayer must include.
Wow.
And so that's what joy is when you think about all of the people, not just in the United States of America, but you start going out and going, oh my God, look at this beautiful place. We get to live and the diversity of people and possibilities on it. That gives me joy.
I'm going to say muchas gracias. And thank you for being here. And I've learned a lot. And now I'm going to carry you with me for the rest of the day and just in a joyful way. So thank you so much.
Oh my God. I am ready to go on for the rest of my day too. This was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hi, it's Liz. Please join me every Tuesday for coffee to talk about heart and humanity with our elected leaders. Remember to hit subscribe to get an alert when a new episode is live and for exclusive content. Ciao.